Ready? Let me apologize for being a few minutes late. I was getting a briefing on what is taking place at GCOM and by the commissioners who represent people there. Can you ask them to just turn them outside? Sorry about that. We just have a disturbance outside, some loud people. So yes, I was saying to you that we just had a briefing, and it's another torturous day of trying to reach a decision on a final or a recount of the ballots that would meet the standards of transparency and that would not be tampered with. And so many of you have been following this issue with bated breath. You have been awaiting a decision for several weeks now from the Commission. And unfortunately, we have a situation in the Commission where you have individuals there representing APNU who are putting a roadblock to any movement forward on this issue. And this is why the chair, particularly the chair, needs to wake up and see that she needs to take decisive decisions. She needs to end the charade that's going on there. You have some compromised staff in the Secretariat who are doing all they can to slow down the process. And then when it gets to the Commission level, we have the 3 persons representing APNU who are putting roadblocks. So the latest is that tomorrow we'll have a decision. We thought we would have had this decision a long time back as to when this recount will start and how it will be pursued. Let me make it clear about the proposals that we have put on the table, because since last week I saw APNU and the others have been trying to spin this issue. The proposal that we put on the table was to complete the recount in 10 days, and this is a recount for the entire country, starting with Region 4. That is the proposal we put. We put in place, we said that the recount must be witnessed by the observers and the political parties, and that the staff of GCOM must be limited. What is going on now is that Lowenfield and the APNU commissioners want to, although they argue about limiting staff, the GCOM Secretariat staff there in their room where they're at each workstation, that they argue that there should be limited numbers of people because of COVID. They want to put large numbers of the Secretariat staff, and no doubt these will be handpicked by Roxanne Myers and Lowenfield and some of the other compromised people in there, so that they can stack up each of the workstations with people who can then attempt to compromise the recount. We have made it clear that each table can have 2 Secretariat staff or 2 staff, and these must be independently picked. You can't use compromised people. And then you have the representatives of the parties. You have the observer groups there. We have urged the chair of GCOM to agree to have either private audit firms or the Auditor General present in the room in each of these stations, and that it must be live streamed. These are all critical measures necessary to prevent a situation like the one we had in the GCOM Secretariat, or where Mingo made the fraudulent declaration and the Secretariat staff interfered with and tampered with the tabulation. So our proposal is clear, and the chair of GCOM must be aware. She has to be aware now that the entire country is awaiting on her to move this process forward. I saw just now from the Bar Association a press release to say that the Bar Council is deeply concerned by what appears to be a laissez-faire approach taken by GCOM and its secretariat. The absence of a declared election result some 6 weeks after the general and regional elections, in addition to being outside of the statutory prescribed period, is disgraceful and inexcusable. And the court, they made the point that the court dealt with these issues urgently with dispatch. Yet we have seen this interminable delay at GCOM, day after day, as though they have 100 years, the chair not taking decisive positions early and not addressing definitively the many attempts by the Secretariat and APNU commissioners to delay the recount. So there is a need for urgency, and I hope that the chair understands that with whatever proposal that they put in place. It cannot take forever. It must be, as I said before, all 10 regions can be counted in 10 days. It's entirely doable. The laws provide for Guyana a count on election night to be done, which would give you the SOPs, and then a recount to be done, and even another recount. All could be done within 15 days and to facilitate a declaration. Yet they can complete one recount in this entire in 10 days. And so I dealt with that last week, and so I'm not going to belabor that point. But this is not an audit. They don't even want a recount. They don't want to release the SOPs, but they just now they want, in fact, they want an audit. Vincent Alexander, he's a chief delayer there. He and we have already dealt with Vincent Alexander because he too has pecuniary interests to protect in this regard. We can deal with that at some other point in time. So we hope that the decision will be made by the chair to address this recount urgently, that all the measures to enhance transparency will be there, including the televising of the recount, etc. People may be losing patience a bit across Guyana, but I want to assure them that the international community is not giving up on Guyana. Somehow, I think in APNU's mind and the cabal, the corrupt cabal that is trying to steal elections, they believe if they sit this out long enough, that the world will lose interest. We will definitely not lose interest in Guyana because the PPP won these elections, and the recount will prove that, and we are pursuing this to the end. And the international community has made it clear that no government sworn in on the basis of results that are not credible will be recognized, and they're sticking with that. So that is why I was so pleased yesterday that the OAS issued a statement. And it says that in the statement that the proposal by the chief elections officer that would require 5 months to recount less than 500,000 ballots is unheard of in any democracy and would be unacceptable under any circumstances. This is from the OAS saying it is unheard of in any democracy and would be unacceptable under any circumstances. So I hope that the chair recognizes this. This is the organization that represents the entire region. The statement goes on to say, in particular, the mission requests GCOM take particular care to ensure that the officials to be engaged in the recount are selected based on their impartiality, and those who have displayed partisan behavior are excluded. Now, here is the Organization of American States yesterday issuing a statement saying that some people must be excluded from this recount. And clearly, they witnessed the partisan behavior on the part of these people. So people like Roxanne Myers and Mengo and the others who are there, who will undermine any process, must be excluded from this process in the recount. It goes on. I'm not going to deal with all of the issues raised in the OAS statement, but the result of the recount, one says the result of the recount for each polling station is compared with a statement of poll signed by the presiding officers. So clearly, the OAS still believes that this statement of poll should be utilized. And in this regard, I don't see what is the big issue holding up the release of the statement of poll. GCOM has so far not, in fact, they're hiding from releasing the statements of poll as though they don't exist. These were signed by all the presiding officers across the country. And the chair should ask them now to release all of these statements of poll. So I want to urge people to be a bit patient. I know in Guyana where people's patience would be tested now, but the international community remains fully engaged. We've been briefing them. I've been briefing CARICOM and many others about the situation in Guyana, and they are resolved to see this through to the end. And there is no weakening in that resolve when it comes to democratic principles being observed. So please don't lose patience in this regard. So we are awaiting, from what I gather, the chair will make some decisions tomorrow. And so we are anxiously awaiting to see that those decisions are consistent with the urgency of the situation, and two, that it will ensure the transparency of the recount, and that there will be measures against anyone who tries to tamper with the results. Now, I have received quite a few questions over the course of the day from people who are concerned about various things. But before I deal with this, I just want to address something that is in the public domain now. So APNU prepared this dossier. It's nearly 150 pages, and they filed it through the FARA in the United States of America, which is a requirement. And this, so I want to urge Guyanese to read the dossier that they prepared, 150 pages. Now, you will, if you have a 10-year-old child, they will be able to produce a more coherent and a more coherent dossier for anyone to read. This is the worst document I've ever seen in a long time. Even me, who was very familiar with the situation in Guyana, can't navigate my way through the confusing elements of this document. So this is what they hope they would use to lobby the US government and members of Congress to change their views about the elections in Guyana, and to change, as they said, the narrative in Washington that they are attempting to rig the elections. So let me tell you what this dossier contains. First of all, in the 150 pages, you have about 20 pages of articles from the Chronicle about PPP hooliganism. Then you have another 17 to 20 pages of APNU AFC press releases, where they said they won their elections, etc. And the rest and majority of the document is then made up of the affidavits from Mingo, court documents that have been discredited from Mingo and from Roxanne Myers and all of the others. You'd recall they filed those documents, yet ruling went against them. So this is made up of some articles from Chronicle, from the APNU AFC press releases, and affidavits by the riggers and some APNU members. That is basically this dossier. And then they have a very short but very misleading narrative of what took place on election day. Now, anybody reading this nonsense, this useless document, would see that here you have a government that lost the elections, that is trying to remain in power by hiring and to avoid sanctions by remaining illegally in power, by hiring a firm that is known for sanction busting. One of the principals of the firm that they hired is a Fisher, Mr. Fisher. And as you have seen in the media, that Mr. Fisher worked for, and his firm worked for, or lobbied for, Sudan when the Sudanese government was practicing genocide in Darfur, killing people in Africa. And they wanted the sanctions lifted against Sudan. Well, not only did they fail, but the president of that country now has been deposed of, and he's facing charges before the International Criminal Court. And so this firm that they hired is known for this sort of work that preventing sanctions against countries. So let us talk about yesterday. The PPP issued a press release. And in the press release, we made it clear that from the filing in the FARA, that it was the government of Guyana that the firm claimed they were representing. So based on what Mr. Harman said today, which he has changed, last night he said a government has a legitimate right to defend itself in the Demerara Waves article. And today he said that it is paid for after the issue came out that they cannot use taxpayers' money to pay for a party brief. This is a party's brief. It has, the dossier has APNU AFC on it, not Government of Guyana, which they filed to, that he changed today to say that it's upset supporters who are paying for this. Now, clearly, if this is the case, I don't believe this is the case because someone sent me an email that purported to come from Granger to Harman and the others. And it says, Dear General, hiring of USPR firm. I've seen articles in the daily newspapers about the hiring of a public relations firm by the government of Guyana. Please advise me on the authority for this action, the source of funds for the payment of the services being sought, and the expected benefits. Yours sincerely, David Granger. Apparently, after this issue broke, Mr. Granger wrote Harman this email, and that is why Harman changed from the government paying for it to now the party paying for this effort. Now, this could all be contrived. It could be Mr. Granger himself using this and releasing this email as a ploy to deflect from the seriousness of the issue, which is a misappropriation of funds and illegal according to our laws, to use public funds to pay for a party activity or a party-related activity. So this could be an attempt, a carefully crafted attempt between Mr. Granger and Joseph Harman to deflect attention from it, as though he did not know of the effort and therefore he's very concerned about it. And then Harman issuing this clarification that it's paid for by party. Or alternatively, it could be that what some people are saying, that there is a cabal in the government made up of Harman, Trotman, Cathy Hughes, people like Roysdale Ford, the Van West Charles, and many others from Congress Place, who are hell-bent on staying in power at all costs because they have so much to lose and so much in their closet that that could possibly land them in prison. And they are keeping Granger in the dark on these matters, misleading him. So we're yet to get Granger himself to say what he means. But if this brief, the brief that they filed, the dossier, is sent by the government or the party, even if it's the party, it has to, I'll talk a bit about the content, what their line is in a moment. But clearly, the firm hired that they're paying $72,000 of taxpayers' money, I believe, being used for this. And I would like to see the source. In fact, the company should release the source of the payment, whether it's coming directly from Congress Place, like when we paid for the Mercury firm, we paid directly from the party. So we can show the money transfer. It would be interesting for us to see the money transfer order that Harman made from the party to this company. And it's a large sum of money. It's $72,000 per month, US dollars per month, taxpayers' money. So if what Harman is saying today is true, then this firm and its principals have misled the US government. They are going to circulate what is essentially a party dossier to members of the US administration and to Congress when on behalf of the government of Guyana, because in their FARA filing, where they had to fill in the blanks, name of foreign principal, they said Government of Guyana, branch of the agency, Ministry of the Presidency, name and title of official, Joseph Harman, Director General, Ministry of the Presidency. That's what they said. They're lobbying the U.S. government on behalf of the government of Guyana, the Ministry of Presidency, and their contact is Joseph Harman. And the purpose of this is to improve the relations between Guyana and the U.S. That is what they filed. So if as Harman is saying, they are lobbying on behalf of the APNU and not the government of Guyana, then the company misled the U.S. government and made a false filing as is required by law. And we will come back to that. If it's taxpayers' money, it's illegal here, and the company that made this filing could be liable because this is using public funds for private purpose, which is an illegality. If it's illegal in our laws here, under US laws too, it should be illegal to do so. I am not worried too much about the document itself. As I said, any sensible person, and I know that in the US administration and in the Congress, they are very sensible people with staff. And all they have to do is to Google Guyana or request a brief from the State Department, or just do 5 minutes of research, and you will see how useless this dossier is. So what they're trying to do, though, is to raise the red herring. They make claims that they won the elections, and there is a conspiracy by the PPP to deny them this victory. That is what they're telling people in Washington in this dossier. So they're raising a lot of red herrings, hoping that the US government's position will change based on some words, like their dog whistling a couple of words. They know that there's concern in Washington about the Chinese involvement in our hemisphere, rightfully so. So for example, I'll tell you some of the most ludicrous parts of it. So in one part of this document, they said that the PPP gifted the Chinese a large piece of land to build a base in Guyana. And two, that the PPP had a preferential arrangement for the Chinese, a visa arrangement, and now 10% of Guyana are people of Chinese descent. Now, that's also false. But you've had more Chinese nationals come into Guyana under APNU AFC, many of them through a corrupt arrangement involving Felix and the others, than under the PPP. That's one. And two, it is up to recently that they've been receiving large amounts of gifts from China for the army. In fact, the surveillance system that they're using against the PPP and many others came from China. And also, so it was the PPP who protested outside of the convention center, saying that the Chinese were coddling this government, which was illegal, when the Americans, and we were protesting for Granger to hold the elections, to name a date, and the Western powers issued a strong statement, and then he was invited, Granger was invited to the celebration and being cuddled at the convention center. We were the ones protesting it. So it's all nonsensical, but they know that the Chinese presence in the region is a cause of concern for the U.S. So they're whistleblowing there, they're dog whistling there. Then in the document it says also that Bharrat Jagdeo is working with Maduro to undermine Guyana's border issues and sovereignty. Now, that is so stupid, in fact, that I can't respond to it. It's utterly stupid. The third thing they said, oh, we work with, we brought the Russians in, and Guyana will become a Russian base if we win the elections. Well, we were in power for 23 years, and we didn't trade our sovereignty to anyone. And that will not happen. In fact, we've made it clear that we subscribe to open democratic values, and we share that with the free world. With unlike Granger and the others, who have been going to Cuba a lot, and it seems to be operating from a different playbook, where they don't believe in free and fair elections and democracy. We have always believed and fought for free and fair elections. So the whole thing about us bringing in Russians to hack the system, the nonsense that Guyanese have been dismissed here, they put that in their brief to Washington too. And what is quite revealing, though, is that in their brief to the U.S. government and to congressmen, they said that both David Granger, in their own brief, and Joseph Harmon are U.S. citizens. Now, one of two things apply here. If they are U.S. citizens, then they misled the whole country. And in fact, David Granger should not have been president, and Harmon should not have been on the list of candidates. And if they're not, because you remember this is their own brief, they put that in. So we have to believe what they put in their brief or their dossier. But if they now claim that they are not, that means if this is wrong, they're wrong about that in their brief, how many other things are inaccurate in their brief or their dossier? If they can't get it straight, whether the Granger is a U.S. citizen or not, or Harmon is a U.S. citizen or not. If they claim that's error, an error in their document. They have other things like Granger was former chief of staff, etc., which is not true. But if that is inaccurate, then how much more is inaccurate? In fact, the whole document is inaccurate. The big stars of this document are people like Malcolm Harry Paul and Benchcop and the others, not anyone serious. And so if if it is inaccurate, then they filed with the U.S. government and submitted to the U.S. government misleading statements. They've in a ton of other places, they have sought to mislead members, that is, if they're not U.S. citizens, and this is wrong, they've sought to mislead the U.S. Congress, the people that they are going to circulate this brief to, or who they've circulated the brief to. They're misleading them into believing that the Harman and Granger are U.S. citizens, and therefore there must be some greater sympathy for them. So there is so much misleading about this document and what it is trying to do, but it's not going to succeed because, as I said before, the country knows what's going on. In fact, they have in here that they won the elections, and it's the PPP that is delaying the recount. Didn't want the recount, and now is delaying the recount. We all know that that's not true, but as I said before, if I had to spend all my time going through page by page the inaccuracies in this dossier, then it would take me a very, very long time to go through it. They've played a very dangerous line in this document where they have included statements of condemnation from Dharmic Sabha and from the Islamic Trust, but didn't include the statements from for example, the Catholic Church or many others, making it look like it's only the non-Christians who are concerned about the rigging of the elections. All Guyanese are concerned. They also said that the PPP, Jagdeo and Irfan Ali wants Indian Guyanese to attack others. That's also not just reprehensible, it should be condemned by the Ethnic Relations Commission, and in fact we'll write them on this, and it should be the people who prepared this brief, Joseph Harman, Michael Granger, and the others, who should, we hope that under the Racial Hostility Act that they'd be charged for this, there's an offense on this matter. So let me just say that we believe that it's taxpayers' money that have been used to fund this activity, a party activity. We believe that they're misleading members of the U.S. Well, they have filed some misleading statements, and it's all part of the changing of the narrative in Washington. But nobody will seriously look at this dossier and change their position. What we have here in Guyana is a government or a party that has lost the elections, that have refused to abide by the results. Now I'll go to the questions as we indicated. Before, that's all right. Let me see. In the meantime, I'll have some that the staff sent to me. So, what if they tamper with the recount? I think this is a big fear of many people. So, and it's a justifiable fear. Their argument is that if Mingo and Lowenfield, and maybe less so, and Roxanne Myers and the whole secretariat working along with the hustlers in APNU, including Volder Lawrence and the others, and other elements of the security and some elements of the security forces, blatantly attempted to rig the elections in the presence of a large number of international observers and the ambassadors and high commissioners from various countries. What is there now in the recount to prevent a repetition of this? And so it is a fair question. And it bothers a lot of people, and it worries us too. And therefore, that is why we have asked Justice Singh and the Commission to pay keen attention to the safeguards that I've outlined before, which is live streaming, having auditors there, etc., from who are not part of the process but can observe the process. They observe as everyone present in the room to avoid this happening. But what if they still forge ahead? What if the riggers still decide to tamper with the results? And people need to understand, if they do that, then there is no, the OAS said something like in their statement. They said the political crisis in Guyana is not intractable. Well, if they tamper with the recount, then it becomes intractable. So people have been asking me, why do you think the international community has not levied sanctions against individuals and the Granger administration as yet? And I believe that it is because they still see some hope in the recount, that a proper recount be done, credible results be declared, and a president sworn in on the basis of the credible results. They still see some hope in that to avoid having to levy the sanctions and to bring grief to the individuals and to the country. But if they attempt to tamper with the recount, then that doesn't change the position that the results were not credible. So far, the entire international community believes that the results on the basis of the declarations made so far by Mingo are not credible. And if they tamper with the recount, the results remain not credible. And so if they proceed on the basis of to swear in a president on the basis of the recount that is not credible, then the full force, the weight of the international community will fall upon Guyana, and those individuals like a ton of brick. The only reason that these people, and I hope that they understand it too, Joseph Harmon, and Cathy Hughes, and Trotman, and Volder Lawrence, and Roysdale Ford, and all of the others who have been party to this, and the cabal at Congress Place, that the only reason is because that hope is still not lost. But the moment any attempt to tamper with the recount is done, and the results will simply not be credible, that means the government would be illegitimate and the sanctions will fall upon their head. So they have one opportunity to fix this and to avoid consequences for themselves and their families. For themselves and their families by allowing this recount to go through in a manner that is transparent and credible. And therefore, to avoid this situation from escalating, which will be dire for many of them personally, because we have had indications that they're very, very serious about this. In fact, this government has defied the international community. When the United States and others made statements, it says, oh, they're interfering in our sovereignty. These are the same people hiring a law firm to now go and lobby in the US with a fake dossier, a dishonest dossier, to lobby the US government. And a couple of weeks ago, they were claiming, oh, the US is interfering in our sovereignty. And saying that they can survive without the US and all sorts of nonsense they were talking about. So that is how I see this. So we will take all the steps necessary to ensure that the recount is done in a proper manner. And I hope that they understand that tampering with this process, or attempting to tamper with this process, removes that hope that the international community has, that the OAS still says is not intractable, that this could be fixed. But if it can be fixed there, it doesn't mean that if the recount is tampered with, like David Hines and the others want to happen, that suddenly everybody will accept the results and Granger could be sworn in and he would gain legitimacy. In fact, it will confirm the conspiracy that is taking place now between elements of these, between elements in APNU and AFC and GCOM Secretariat and Commission, with some lawyers involved too. The next question is, Parliament must be convened. I saw the Bar Association mention this today too, that Parliament has to be convened according to our Constitution within 4 months from the dissolution of the previous Parliament. And so that brings us to somewhere at the end of this month. So people are concerned that they are delaying to drag this out until the end of the month, and then suddenly they will convene the Parliament and go back and pass budgets and all of that stuff. So I think that is the fear being expressed here. Well, first of all, if there is no declaration of the final declaration of the results. Yesterday, the chair made it clear. We have set aside the declaration of Lowenfield that he took to the commission, and there is a recount to be pursued. So until the recount is completed and a government or an announcement, an official declaration is made, we will not know how many members of Parliament each party will have. So how are you going to convene this Parliament, reconvene this Parliament, if there is no declaration of the results and there is no Parliament that is, how are you going to convene it yet? Are you going to still, 33 members of APNU will show up like from the last Parliament? In fact, we made it clear that only the president has according to our Constitution now, that's his office is safeguarded. The ministers cease being ministers from the day the elections were held, and they cease being members of Parliament from that date. So how are you going to convene the Parliament? Who's going to say which number you have and which speaker will preside over that sort of arrangement? How they would have to appoint a new speaker. So I see it as practically impossible for them to do that. And if they do it, they will run afoul of the entire world again, and not least from the PPP and the other forces that are fighting for democracy in Guyana. What could be done against people who have a pecuniary interest? That is something that came up here. It's a long question, so I'm just paraphrasing it. And they're listed: Van West Charles, Roysdale Ford, Corbin, Alexander, Lowenfield, a number of people. I suspect they're talking about these people who have been beneficiaries of large contracts, either contracts or positions in the government. Like Roysdale Ford is the head of the gaming authority with a ton of corruption there. And I have no doubt that he probably very fearful that that will be exposed in a new government. That's why he's fighting so much. In fact, somebody told me, he said it's an existential fight. Existential for him, but not for the country or the people of Guyana. And then I suspect with Lowenfield, they're talking about a beneficiary of land that he got from Lands and Survey in just June of last year. Alexander has a big budget from an NGO that that receives state funds. Nearly $100 million of state funds went to that NGO. So I suspect people are saying that the reason they're digging in, a few individuals are digging in, is because they have the money interest or corruption to protect. And I believe the entire international community is aware of these individuals. They're aware of their transgressions. They're aware of their family links. And they're not going to get away unscathed. So they're unscathed. So they're not going to get a free pass. And they too must understand this, that if this goes the way they want it to go, that it's not going to end well for many of them. And so that's how I see it. This government spend public funds? So this is another question that came in. And so let me make it clear. As last week I said, we want a system where we can continue with routine activities. We don't want to disadvantage people, particularly in the public sector, where they would lose their salaries or pensioners would lose their pensions, etc. So we will have no objection to those things being routinely done until we have a government that is legitimate. But I made it clear that the Minister of Finance and public officers would have to answer for money that they release and they disburse to people and are spent by people who are imposters, who, especially these ministers. And the Minister of Finance in particular, he will be in serious, serious trouble should he sign anything or release any funds, knowing the situation now, that the results are not The final declaration has not been made. Only the president's position is reserved that the results show a PPP victory. They know that too in APNU. And one of the funny things is that they could spend 72,000 US dollars a month preparing a dossier to lobby abroad, 150 pages, but they can't release their own statements of poll, the 879 statements of poll for Region 4, to support their claims that they won Region 4. That they won Region 4 with the margins they did, because they did win Region 4, but not with the added 20,000 more votes to the SOPs. And so one would have thought that they would have sent a link to the US congressmen like we have, saying, look at our own SOPs, they support a victory here. There is nothing, not send what Malcolm Harry Paul wrote, or Benchcop, or Harman said, etc. Release your own statements of poll. But of course, they didn't do that. So I just want to make sure that the Minister of Finance, well, not Minister of Finance, the former Minister of Finance, the one that he knows he has no role in this period, and whatever he signs, he's doing so illegally, as are the other ministers. The next question is, who owns Ocean View Hotel? I don't know who owns Ocean View Hotel, and I'm sure that will be investigated. I'm concerned about what I read, that it could be another corruption scheme. But we are not opposed to a more organized approach to the fighting the COVID-19 scheme, the virus. But this government has been a failure in this regard. First of all, they lack legitimacy, so they lack authority. And at this time, you do need a government with full authority to address this situation. But because they're still hanging on, attempting to rig the elections, we are in this situation. Secondly, that they act in very partisan way. The CDC, I'm told, Harman is visiting there, etc., but they're only giving out hampers to certain people. And therefore, the whole of the country, this should be a national effort. People all across the country who require help should get the help, and the CDC should stop. In fact, the CDC has lost credibility because of the manner in which it is working now. So I don't have a problem with the preparation of a decent quarantining facility if that is required by to ensure that people who have to be quarantined, that they are quarantined in places that are clean and that have all the required conditions for them to do so with dignity, etc. I don't have a problem against that effort, but in relation to the Ocean View Hotel, we have to examine it carefully whether it is another kickback scheme. But I don't want to speak too much about this at this time, about that particular issue. I'm just very concerned about the entire approach to fighting this virus, this pandemic, and that there's very little organization. The worst person you could have put to do this is Nagamoto. He has no skills whatsoever, management skills, and that because of the incompetence of this government, more people will suffer, and that's the first concern. And secondly, my concern about people getting help now in this difficult period. There are other concerns about jobs and income, etc., and help to the private sector to get back on its feet. But we, as I said earlier last week, that we are examining all of these issues to make sure that we can recover swiftly from this virus. There's another issue here about the AK-47 being used in an incident. And I too am very concerned about this issue. From what I gathered, they're not just AK-47, but someone told me that they're AR-15, M16 that were used in this incident. And from what I gather, it's a company that is very close to individuals in the government. In fact, they got a license to export gold under very suspicious circumstances. So I believe the police have to look into this matter. The police have to look into this issue and ensure that nobody acts with impunity. But there are elements within the police force who have been covering up for a lot of people and have been very partisan when they get calls from members of the APNU or AFC cabal. And I gather that in this case, that there was an effort made at the political level to ensure that the full force of the law is not brought against these individuals who clearly broke the law. But we see that every single day. If the government is illegal, what should be the role of the police and the army? So I guess this person is concerned about what will happen should Granger forge ahead and they declare he gets sworn in on the basis of these fraudulent results. We're still hopeful that we can avoid all of this so that we can resolve this issue swiftly without individuals or the country having sanctions. But what I guess this person is dealing with the worst case scenario. So I've made it clear from the very beginning that the de facto regime that will be installed should this worst case scenario play out will, first of all, not gain any local recognition. A number of organizations have said they will not work with them. We in the People's Progressive Party will not go to Parliament. We will be protesting this. The ministers, Granger, everyone, every single place they go, they will be confronted at their homes and their workplaces with a situation where they are exposed as thieves and hustlers because they would have stolen a whole election. So they can't expect business nor as usual from us in Guyana. There will be a strong struggle, local struggle, waged by the People's Progressive Party and no doubt the other democratic forces that are concerned. Because if you allow a little cabal, a criminal cabal, to steal an election, then there is very little future for us. Secondly, the world will not see the government as legitimate. The Commonwealth, CARICOM, the many Western governments will declare the government illegitimate, basically illegal, a de facto regime that would have been sworn in not in accordance with the Constitution and with the will of the people. So then that leaves a big question. Will the security forces, the army and the police and others, particularly the army, are they going to support a government that has been certified as illegitimate by the international community? Take orders from an illegal, illegitimate government. So let me give you a scenario. For example, that happens and there's a mass protest and police and the army come out to defend an illegal, illegitimate government. And someone gets killed there in that activity, where a legitimate protest against a dictatorship. Now, globally, think about the condemnation. Suddenly, the security forces are aligned with taking illegal orders from an illegal, illegitimate government, which resulted in the demise of one or more individuals. That will become a case for the International Criminal Court, because you would have had an illegal government giving illegal orders to suppress a public protest for democracy. Not only would the politicians' names be mentioned or will the case be filed against, but it will be filed against the members of the security forces who have done that, because they'll be complicit. So that is the kind of scenario that could play out if the worst case situation happens. We don't want to go down that route. We don't want to go down that route, because that will put our security forces in a very, very tricky situation where they'll be forced to either to support an illegitimate government that is declared illegitimate by the international community. And therefore, their actions in support of an illegitimate government would be questionable. So these are some issues. There could be hundreds of scenarios that we have to think through. And I hope that the cabal, that criminal cabal in APNU and AFC, I think they can hang on, know what kind of risk, personal risk, and the country they're putting at risk, and the position they will put our security forces in, should they persist with this attempt to rig the elections. And I hope that the president himself recognizes how untenable such a situation would be. He'd not be able to manage the country. Personal sanctions against him and the country becoming a pariah. He himself spoke about this in 2014, that he didn't want Guyana to become a pariah state, or when he was lobbying for sanctions, when there was a prorogation of parliament. He knows what that means. I don't think they understand it, because somehow they feel the issue will go away, but it will not go away. These are some of the questions that I have received. As I said before at the beginning, a lot is dependent on the chair and the credibility of the process now. I hope that tomorrow we can move to a recount that will allow the entire country to move forward, a legitimate government sworn in, and to avoid personal as well as sanctions on the country, and allow us to move forward so that we can tackle the important things to our people: jobs, money in their pocket, to addressing this COVID-19 situation, prosperity once again, and for all of Guyana. So I'm not going to deal with the David Hines and the others. People have been dealing with them, the stupidity, or they just totally became unhinged now. A lot of them, the loss of their perks. You know, people who were making $50,000 who are earning now $2 million a month, and many of them are earning that, or $800,000 or $1 million a month. They become unhinged when they think that they would lose that. And that is why many of them are digging in, or the Van West Charles and the illegal contracts, or the Roysdale Ford and the others with what's going on with the Gaming Commission. They become unhinged, and they become part of a criminal cabal. And so I'll just end here now. I'll keep you informed. There are lots of questions on the economy that I see popping up, but maybe next time around I can deal with that. There's one that just popped up which says, but the world, the IMF and the others are still predicting a huge growth rate for Guyana. So the growth rate has been revised downwards from 80-something% to 50%. So it's still a big growth rate for the country. But that's all because of oil production. And so you can have a situation where the country is growing, the economy, by 100, 200%, not 50%. And more people have lost jobs or are losing jobs. The more of the sectors are in trouble, less money in circulation, more hardships brought on to people. So next week I can explore that a bit, because some people get deluded by the fact, and no doubt in APNU too, we can grow by 50%. Well, that 50% growth is on paper. Doesn't mean a single cent more in people's pocket. In fact, we could grow by 50% and have less money in our pockets, less revenue, less jobs, etc., because of what's happening now. So I'll address those issues maybe next week. Thank you.